Hey YouTube, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel. My name is JC and this is the Cuban Redneck DIY channel where we do cooking and grilling on Tuesdays, DIY stuff on Fridays. If this is your first time here, thank you for stopping by and I really appreciate if you wish to like, share, and subscribe. So welcome back to the garage, and today we're going to be stepping outside our comfort zone and we actually will be building something for a change. I'm talking about building this audiophile quality speaker kit from Parts Express. This is the Dayton Audio C-Note. There's 100 videos on this thing out there, and I don't know how many blog reviews. It actually is very well regarded and referred to as an excellent entry-level audiophile speaker kit. I have never heard it, so I decided to order one. This thing is about $100 delivered to your door, which is not bad. It has pretty decent quality. I'm talking about air inductors. It has polycaps, both the high and the low pass, which is something you don't find in branded speakers like, I don't know, 𝐬𝐤𝐞𝐫 or Bose or things like that. The Sandcast resistors, I don't know about those. I may end up replacing or upgrading those. The issue with this is they, over time, they start getting magnetized and they start coloring the upper end and they affect the width of the stage. I'm not going to get really heavy into definition and stage and height and depth and all this kind of stuff. If you really want to learn about audio, I suggest checking out my friend's YouTube channel. His name is 𝐬𝐤𝐞𝐵 Research. The guy, I will warn you, the guy's at another level, so don't say I didn't warn you. Also, if you're into branded stuff, you know, 𝐬𝐤𝐞𝐫 and things like that, you may not like what he has to say, but nevertheless, the guy knows his shit and he's very good at what he does. So getting back to our subject, I don't need speaker enclosures per se. I don't have room to put them. I'm looking to build a plate underneath my TV, and I was looking at something like the Morel. Morel has a really nice in-wall plate, but that's like $3,500. I'm not spending $3,500 on that. So I decided to instead find a speaker that I like how it sounds and then just build it into a plate. The issue is that I've spoken to several people and they tell me that there ain't nothing at Best Buy under $500 that can touch this with a 10-foot pole. So I say I'll decide to gamble it and go ahead and build a set. I know this may be of interest to a lot of people, and a lot of people may not have an issue with an actual enclosure. So that's why I decided to make this video. I hope you enjoy it. Check this out.
As I said in the intro, I truly believe that this audiophile speaker kit from Parts Express is a great value, but at the same time, the quality of the MDF enclosure is somewhat questionable. It is important to point out that while many brands like Bose are okay with making speakers out of particle board, the standard to the audiophile community is MDF. With that said, half-inch MDF is substandard, even for a small bookshelf speaker like the C-Note. I believe that the stored energy and resonance we see in the decay graph is caused in part by the speaker enclosure. One easy way to address the speaker cabin resonance is by installing dowels from the front baffle to the back board and from one side to the next. As you can see, this is a pretty simple task. That is, if you do as they say, measure twice and cut once. The first set of holes I made were too close to the edge, defeating the purpose. No big deal, I made some plugs, glued them in place, took proper measurements and tried it again. I could have deleted this from the video, as many on YouTube would do, but more than likely, someone was going to pick it up and point it out. So, the ideal position for the front dowels is 2.5 inches from the edge, right in between the woofer and the tweeter. For the side dowels, I had no choice but to go with a 4-inch depth. That is because that is as deep as my drill press will allow, and 5.5 inches on the vertical axis, which is actually the halfway point. With that out of the way, we can get started by putting together our speaker enclosures, which in my opinion is the most difficult part of this speaker kit. My original train of thought was to clamp it onto my Harbor Freight folding workbench. This idea got foiled really quick by the inaccuracies of the parts. I ended up having to improvise and use a variety of clamps, as well as some of my homemade corner jigs. In woodworking, they often said you can't have enough clamps, and I don't, so I ended up gluing one speaker box at a time. I guess some corner clamps or jigs like this, or even this one, would have made the job easier. These are in my wish list, but the purchase has taken a backseat since until now I've had no need for them. 3 or 4 hours later, the glue on the back side of our speaker enclosure is set, and we are ready to move to the next step, the installation of the baffle board. Now, this presents a challenge of its own, and a place where I wish that Dayton Audio aka Parts Express would have exercised better judgment. What is the problem? The issue is that the baffle board is a 1/2" MDF. Because of that, it is not practical to make a rabbet as in the back plate, especially with the rounded edges, which are ideal for baffle diffraction. There is a chance that once we apply glue and pressure to the baffle board, we may end up with a little bit of position shifting and less than a perfect joint. To compensate, I'm going to drill several 1/16 of an inch holes and drive some 1 1/4 finished nails into the enclosure, in hope that the baffle board stays in place during the glue up. Some may say that I could have used a brad nailer, but I think that the chances of splitting the MDF are too great.
Alright guys, so it's the following morning. Our speaker, the glue has set on our speaker enclosures, our speaker boxes, and we are ready to take this to the next step. However, I came and took a look at this earlier this morning, and I was a little bit disappointed. We have a little bit of shifting. I was expected. When you do a butt joint in wood, especially when you use glue and you compress that, there's always a little chance or a little wiggle. 1/64, it's just a hair, but it is always present most of the time. So I took a look earlier this morning, and yeah, I was kind of disappointed in what I found. Not much you can do about it. It is the way the speaker enclosures were built, or were designed, I should say. This could have been avoided by just adding a small rabbet onto the front plate. Ideally, I understand that they're trying to use a 1/2" material, therefore it's not really ideal, but as I said earlier, if you were to use a 3/4 inch material, that could have been avoided, and the end result would have been a much better product. Even though we used the little pin nails as guides, we still ended up with a little bit of shifting. I don't know if you can see, but this one is a little bit on the positive, and it's negative on the opposite face. As I said, this could have been corrected. But anyways, so at this point, I'm going to say that if you have woodworking capability, if you have a table saw, you have a router, I would strongly recommend if you want really good sounding speakers to go ahead and re-engineer these enclosures, because you're going to end up with a better product. However, I understand that a lot of people don't have that, and the reason they're buying a $100 speaker kit over a $400 or $500 one from like GL Research or somebody like that is that budget. And so I'm going to go ahead and finish the speakers to my best capabilities, and I hope that this serves to those who are building the original kit to some way. We're going to go ahead and install our dowels, which is going to do away with resonance. And I went to the auto parts store earlier today, this morning, after I saw how the finish came out, and purchased some glazing putty. This is an automotive putty that is used when you have an edge between bundle, body filler, and metal, or when you have deep scratches of sanding on bodywork. It's not, I'm not going to say it's kind of a cheesy way of getting around that, but the best way to do it is to do multi-step sanding, but a lot of people don't like to do that. Anyways, that's what I'm going to use to make up for this little gaps here after I sand it. And I've been told by a lot of people, somebody brought to my attention that there's a lot of people out there that do this with plaster or with compound for drywall. I'm not 100% sure that's going to last over time with expansion and contraction, and even on indoors in an AC environment. The wood is going to expand and contract quite a bit. It may end up cracking. I know for a fact this will not. This actually, there's a lot of cars out there with this on it, and they're still running around. So with that said, something else that I want to bring to your attention is that, and this might be once again a handicap to those who don't have woodworking tools, and that is this edge here. I do not like sharp edges on MDF. They get blemished very easily. And you might say, well, the speakers are going to go on a shelf or on a stand. They're really not going to get bounced around. Trust me when I say, if you leave a sharp edge on MDF like this, unless you're going to put veneer, wood veneer, these things are going to get banged around. So I'm going to go ahead and round all the edges. We're going to go ahead and put putty all over the place. We are going to finish this to the best of my capability with what you get from the kit. So check this out.
The first step to our finishing process is the gluing of the dowels, and this should be pretty easy. If you clamp the baffle in the backboard as I did, the holes for the dowels should be perfectly aligned. So go ahead and insert the dowels into position, and using a Japanese saw, trim the end. You can also do this with a hacksaw blade, or simply just mark it, take it out, and cut it. As far as the gluing process goes, I apply glue to the back holes first. Push the dowels until they almost reach the back. Apply glue to the front portion and slide them in place. I allowed them to sit in the Florida sun for about 2 hours, and then I came back to round the edges using a 1/4 inch round over bit and my Ryobi cordless router. If you don't have a router, just consider killing the sharp edges with a sander, a rasp, or even a file.
Alright, so it's a little bit late in the day. I went out and took care of some stuff and let this thing sit in the sun, make sure they were well pure and dry. After a little bit of block sanding, I got this thing somewhat looking pretty decent. We're gonna have to put a coat of primer and see what that reveals, where all the low spot and the hot spots are, and basically deal with that. So let's go ahead and put one coat of primer, a thick coat of primer, so we'll see what that reveals.
I placed spacers on the speaker boxes to avoid getting a hard line from the spray. I sprayed one side and let it sit for 30 to 40 minutes. Then I came back and did the other side. Here's what they look like the next morning. This may look terrible if you haven't done this before, but trust me, they look pretty good. The filler primer has done its job. It has sealed a lot of the rough texture from the MDF and the seams. So let's get some 220 paper on our sander and go at it. After getting the rough out, I switched over to a 220 sponge block. Why? Well, let's just say I'm old school. In my opinion, a sanding block gives you a lot more feedback as to what's going on with the surface, resulting in a much better finish. With both of our speaker boxes sanded, we now have to deal with the details. These little pinholes is what we're going to fix with the glazing putty. Apply a thin coat wherever you see imperfections and allow it to dry for at least an hour. We are then going to do some exercise. What do I mean? With a flat sanding block and 320 sandpaper, we're going to smooth, let me correct that. We're going to remove most of the glazing putty we just applied. Sometimes this step may require multiple applications, where you have to apply primer, putty, and then sand. But after closer examination, our speaker boxes are looking pretty good. I'm going to apply another layer of primer and see if that reveals any imperfections. I'll tell you, although this is primer, our enclosures are starting to look pretty good. I let the primer dry overnight, and the next morning we're back at sanding. This time with a 400 grit, but with the intention of just smoothing out the surface for our first coat of paint. After sanding all faces, I wipe the speaker enclosure clean with a cotton rag and rubbing alcohol. I have never used this Krylon lacquer, so I'm going to spray a very thin coat on the back of the speaker to figure out not only the coverage, but also if it levels out. I have to say that I'm pretty pleased. The can says you can handle the material after 1 hour, so I'm going to let it sit for 2 hours before we do the other side. Prior to spraying the other side, we need to sand the overspray area. If you feel the side of the speaker enclosure, you will notice that it's somewhat rough towards the bottom at the edge of the spray pattern. This is caused by overspray, and it needs to be sanded with a 400 grit sandpaper before spraying the other side. Both sides of our speaker enclosure are now painted, and although we have a little bit of orange peel as expected, the finish is quite acceptable. Once again, allow the speaker enclosures to dry overnight. The following morning, we're back to sanding. This time, wet sanding with 1000 grit. Please make sure that the paper you are using is wet sanding capable. If you're not familiar with this, it means exactly that, wetting the surface to be sanded. We're going to follow this with somewhat of a wet second coat. It is important that you look at the surface you're spraying at an angle and make sure that you lay down a wet but yet even coat. I did not speed this up so that you can see the pattern the spray is leaving on the surface. Now, don't overdo it because you can run the risk of a run, and that would be a lot of extra work in the way of more sanding. But do make sure that you give the corners an extra pass. After 10 to 15 minutes, the paint is going to start to level, giving you an idea what it's going to look like. We still have a little bit of orange peel. That is caused by the size of the droplet of our spray can, and nothing you can do about it. But overall, the finish is pretty good. While that dries, let's build some crossovers. The first step on building the crossover for our Dayton Audio Audiophile DIY Speaker Kit is to cut our 6x9 PC board into 3-inch pieces. To do this, I created a simple jig by attaching a small angle bracket to a piece of scrap. Now, adding metal parts to the path of a table saw blade is never a good idea, so please be careful when using such a tool and steer away from the blade. If you have something plastic, by all means use that. After cutting our pieces, we need to cut very shallow lines on the PC board 1 inch apart. We need 2 the long way and 2 the short way. When done, this is what it's supposed to look like. Okay, so we're ready to start working on the crossover. So do you have an idea what I did? It's basically I printed out the original crossover that is on the owner's manual. Then put down my PC board and overlay the components as per the diagram. What this did is generated a drilling pattern, which I'm going to have on my website at pureandredneck.com. Once I mark all the holes with a marker, I'll be drilling them with a 1/16 bit. Because the outside bankers are common, we need to put a couple of jumpers in place here. For that, I will be using the ground cable from a 14 gauge Romex. We're also going to be soldering our leads to the input terminal. Yes, that is correct. I will not be using one of those gold speaker terminals. Why? Well, 90% of the time these are made out of ferrous metals, especially if they have some type of spring action. In other words, they are magnetic and they will greatly affect the resolution of your speakers. In fact, if you own a set of branded speakers like JBL, Yamaha, Polk Audio, and so on, one of the easiest upgrades you can make is to replace the speaker terminal if they are proven to be magnetic. More often than not, I will make this from scratch using a solid brass rod, but I am trying to keep the tool requirements for this project to a minimum. Therefore, I chose hardware rarely available at any big box store, including Home Depots, Lowe's, etc. The first thing we need to do is to thin the slotted end. We need to scrape it with a nail file or a piece of folded sandpaper. Then lay a thin coat of solder around the area. Here are the terminals I'll be using for my 8-gauge speaker cables, but also note that Monster Cable, AudioQuest, and others make a fork style connector like this one that also works very well. Okay, let's assemble the Dayton Audio C-Note. We'll start by installing the port. I'm using some coarse thread 3/4 inch number 6 screws that I got from Park Express. These are perfect for the drivers as well, by the way. As to the port, I'm using the recommended 7-inch length, and I use something called weld bond to glue it together. The next step is the terminals. I inserted a washer in the inside, then one on the outside, a nut, tied it up, and repeated the process on the other one. I added the remaining of the hardware just to make sure they didn't walk away. We can now solder the input leads to the crossover. Notice that I made these cables as long as they needed to be. There is no need to have extra long cables inside the enclosure. I'm holding the crossover in place with a blob of hot glue. Okay, so previously we removed volume for the enclosure by adding bracing. Now we need to add the volume back, theoretically that is, by adding polyfill. The rule of thumb for this is 1 pound per cubic foot, so I'm going to add about half of this 1 pound bag. With that done, we can install the drivers. I hate terminals, so I will be soldering these as well. Okay, so the resonance in the decay graph is still bugging me, and the ring that I demoed on the tweeter and the woofer early on still needs to be addressed. I don't have any Dynamat or even Duck Seal putty, so I decided to use hot glue. It is not as dense, but even when cold, it still remains somewhat gummy. Without a doubt, it should be an improvement. Now, if you're building one of these, you probably spend multiple days putting it together. At this point, what you want to do is grab your cordless drill and screw the speakers in place. Please do me a favor, use a screwdriver. Your drivers will appreciate it.
Alright guys, so our speakers are built. We can no longer call them a speaker kit. I want to start by apologizing. Today's Saturday. You're probably going to see this video on Monday. I really was trying to meet my Friday schedule. However, I spent a lot of time on Thursday doing a demo session using streaming audio, and the video got flagged for copyright infringement. Back and forth with YouTube support, and I actually spoken to several people, and as of late Google has made a mockery out of copyright laws, and that is something that I'll cover into another video. However, our speakers sound extremely well. I didn't get to put a finish coat on the second box because I just wanted to get the demo done, and so I was faced with the choice of having a copyright strike on the channel, or removing that piece. So I decided just to delete the video, do a review of the Dayton Audio C-Note bookshelf speakers, and at the end, and go from there. So I guess you're gonna have to take my word for it. The purpose of this video was, can we call this an Audiophile DIY Speaker Kit? Well, I'm not sure if we can call it reference material, reference speakers, but man, they do sound extremely well. I played a lot of streaming audio. I'm using a smart TV, so the app is built into the TV. I'm streaming that out with a touch link into my receiver, which is not a lot of power. It's a Denon 540, and back to the speakers with an AC3 14-gauge twisted pair with shielding. And that's it. It's really nothing fancy. I rigged up a couple of stands, kind of solid, make sure we have no resonance. But nevertheless, the performance was just mind-boggling. I used a lot of tracks from a channel called, what is it called? Audiophile MBR Store, I think it's called. There was a track in there, or there's a video called DSD Music Streaming. You should check that out. I mean, the space, the width, the height. When the guy starts singing, the singer comes to the front of the room and the rest of the band stays behind. It was truly, truly awesome. I got about $150, maybe $145 into the speakers with all the spray, with all of the upgrades, the screws and everything else. So that's not, I think that's a pretty good buy. I really don't think that you can buy a speaker under $500 or $600, as I was told, that can really touch this. But where the speakers really came to life is a classic song, Ain't No Sunshine in My, There's No Sunshine When You're Not Around, by a girl named Canen, C-A-N-E-N. Her channel is called Joe Next Door, J-O Next Door. And you gotta listen to that track because it is just, I mean, the bass, everything was just so detailed, so much space. I went back to the receiver, make sure the sucker was on stereo. For a minute it sounded like DSP-ish. All this spatial. I mean, the room is very narrow and long, which is kind of weird for an audio, demo room. But normally you want it the opposite way around. You want the width, you want the system against the wide side, and depth is compromisable. But anyways, it was the speakers are extremely well behaved and very, very detailed. I am not going to call them audiophile reference material, but they are definitely awesome monitors. So if you are an aspiring artist, a musician, you want to record some stuff, even if you're a YouTuber, I think that this will make awesome reference speakers as playback reference material. My friend last came by and he said, "Why are you wasting your time with lacquer?" And I don't know, man. But, to me, audiophile speakers are always like piano black, lacquer white or something like that. Although I think that this guy's in like a Ferrari red or Porsche yellow will look freaking awesome. But anyways, he said, "Why don't you use hammer finish?" And that did not even strike my head. If you use hammer finish paint, you don't have to get so detailed with the finishing. So it'd be a little bit easier if you're not into painting. You don't have a lot of experience in painting, a lot less sanding for sure. You can just rough it out with the orbital sander and go primer, of course, and then go straight to paint. What else? I had ordered 2 kits because I was going to make a center channel. This one is going to these are going to get mounted into a wall plate, or people call it nowadays soundbar. I don't consider it to be a soundbar since it's going to be in a wall. So it's more of an in-wall speaker. So this one's going to be with the tweeter that way. That one's going to go with the tweeter that way. And I had ordered another set because I was going to put the center channel, the woofer on top, the width on the tweeter underneath. What I was going to do is I was not going to overlap it. I was not going to overlap the tweeter so that the up axis was more up this way instead of bouncing up more towards the ceiling than towards the bottom. Hopefully get better of a center channel stage that way. But what I've decided to do is I decided to order the center channel. They do have a dedicated center channel with 2 woofers and a tweeter, and see how that sounds. So I placed the order yesterday. I also ordered the some mill resistors. I'm going to replace the resistors in the crossovers. The speakers sound, I mean, it's really, really overwhelming. I don't know if the 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 anti-resonant tricks that we did of the dials made any difference. I don't know if the hot glue on the back of the speakers really mean that much. I don't really know how they sound, out of the box, because I didn't follow the directions, but they are extremely well behaved and something that I strongly recommend. When the center channel comes in, I'm going to go ahead and build the second one, and this one I'm going to make some extra modifications to this as to what I think that should be done to the enclosure in order to get better performance. I may also do a different finish, I don't know, veneer, something like that. Let me know what you guys think. Please leave me a comment. I know this video, if you're into audio, this video is really not for you. My intention was the person who's on a budget, the person who's just, interested in audiophile, but not really, not really, you're going to an audio store, you see $25,000 speakers and $10,000 amps, like hell with this shit. So anyways, this is quality sound, and especially young kids who are into the MP3 garbage. Please download a 96K WAV file, any kind of receiver, and play through these things and sit back, tow them in at about 30 degrees, sit back about 10 feet, 10, 12 feet, and just enjoy music the way it was recorded. You're gonna start listening to stuff that you can take that same recording, go back to your car and listen to it, especially if it's a Bose system, something like that. Any type of premium system, Mark Levinson, in the Lincolns, bring it on. Any car audio system, play a 96K any type of recording, 96K high resolution, and then play them back on this. You're gonna be blown of the extra amount of details and little tweaks and this and that, and the distance between left and right and depth of stage. When the person starts singing, it's like they're right there in front of you, and the rest of the band is 10, 12 feet behind it, which is just awesome. Very few speakers. You have to get into Martin Logans and things like that to really experience that. But $150, come on, man. This is like really good. I hope you guys enjoy the video. If you like this type of material, please don't forget to comment, share, subscribe, whatever you do. I'm trying to grow this channel, man, and I really relied on you guys' support. I'll see you next week. Please support this channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing. And don't forget to hit that notification bell. Thank you.